The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
you're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Monday, December 19th, 2016. Thanks so much for joining us. You could have been anywhere in the world today, but you decided to come and hang out with me, and I do appreciate that. As always, I like to start the show off by thanking my patrons, without whom this is not possible. So everyone get a big round of applause to those who support financially. And our latest patrons include Marcus F., Nick G., Deborah K., and Dana P. Thanks so much for becoming patrons over the weekend. By becoming a patron, you get access to our bonus show. You know the routine. Sometimes I do a bonus show during the week. We've gotten down to the kind of sometimes category, but without fail, I give you a full hour bonus show on Friday with all the news and the headlines for that day, pretty much like we do now, except it's only for patrons on Friday. All right. That being said, let's jump in the news because today has been a hell of a news day, starting with the Russian ambassador to Turkey who was assassinated live in front of cameras, in front of the photographer. I mean, it was captured, completely captured on film. I'm going to play the clip for you. It's all things considered, you do see someone dying, so it is extremely graphic in that sense, but it's not graphic in the sense that you see a lot of blood or anything. Amazingly, you really don't see any blood, which I know is going to end up being fodder for all of the conspiracy theorists. They're gonna say that it didn't really happen because they can't see the blood. However, Russia has confirmed that the ambassador has been killed. Vladimir Putin came out and spoke about it, had a lot to say about it, actually. And so the assassination was at the hands, and you can see actually in this image. Let's see if I can. Yeah, you can barely see him on this screen. Actually, I'm going to put the image on the main screen so that you can see the gentleman in the background behind. On the left-hand side, his name is Melvod Mert Ayadantis. He's a 22-year-old young kid who was a member of the Ankara riot police. Ankara, of course, is in Turkey, and the ambassador from Russia was the ambassador for Turkey. He was at a art gallery speaking on, quote, how Russia as seen by the Turks. This was the exhibition that he was speaking in front of. The gunman was later killed after a 15-minute shootout. This comes on the heels of a day of protest in Turkey over Russian support for Syria, for the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. President Erdogan of Turkey spoke directly with Vladimir Putin by phone. And in a video message, they both agreed that this was an act of provocation in hopes of undermining any type of bilateral agreement in Aleppo, Syria in general. In his remarks, Putin said that this is, quote, undoubtedly a provocation aimed at disrupting the normalization of bilateral ties and the peace process in Syria. Earlier in the day, the foreign and defense ministers of Russia, Iran, and Turkey announced that they will be meeting to discuss the future of Syria, and that meeting will be to understand the views of all the sides involved. So clearly, Turkey and Russia are at odds in Syria. Turkey has their own specific set of, let's call them rebels, that they support. And of course, Russia supports the Assad regime. The reason the conversation about Syria is important here in the assassination of the Russian ambassador is because of what the young man said during the assassination. So this is about 52 seconds long. I want to play the entire thing, and then we'll look at some photographs, because it is, again, it's graphic in the sense that you will see someone die, but we have as a society become highly desensitized to the things we see. So that's why I don't feel too bad about playing this clip. But I want you to see, and I want you to listen to the young man, the assassin, and listen to what he says. Let's see if I can get this to play right. All right. And unfortunately, I don't have subtitles for you, but you could hear some clear parts where he's saying Allah Akbar, and some translations had him saying that this was because specifically he mentioned Aleppo, and this was because of Aleppo, and don't forget Aleppo, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of questions in terms of their protocol and how this particular riot police member of the riot police was able to get in such close proximity and basically get this detailed assignment, right? How he got this assignment. It's been a crazy day, because this was just one of several attacks that happened today. Of course, when anything like this happens, the first thing that comes to mind to most people, or at least to the people who've been commenting on it, is the manner in which World War I was started, as documented in the book. I don't know if you guys have ever read Guns of August. But a lot of people have been making commentary about how the Archduke, who was killed in 1914, was a prelude to World War I, and then they're comparing this, obviously, as a prelude to World War III. It is telling and commendable, I guess, would be. So, yeah, I'm going to use the word commendable. It's commendable to see world leaders actually lead instead of being reactionary. And what I mean by that is, if you watch the press conference from Vladimir Putin, at least publicly, right? I have no idea what he's doing privately. I mean, he could be lining up the troops privately. I doubt it. But publicly, Vladimir Putin was measured, he was calm, and he identified it as what most people identified it to be, a provocation to try to subvert any type of peace treaty to come out of Syria, particularly and specifically the relationship between Turkey and Russia. This is not the first time that Vladimir Putin has been level-headed with regard to Turkey. You remember last year, Turkey shot down a fighter jet from Russia. And what does Vladimir Putin do? Does he retaliate? No, he doesn't retaliate, probably because Turkey is a member of NATO, and that would activate Article 5, and America would be pulled into a hot conflict with Russia. So Vladimir Putin was measured then. He's measured now. Erdogan seems to be measured with this. That, you know, you can only evaluate these people on their most recent activity, right? Right. So, no telling how any of them will act tomorrow. But as far as this is concerned, it is refreshing to see world leaders who are not reactionary and who aren't petulant children in their handling of things that could quickly escalate into a larger conflict. Another example of a measured response would be President Obama's response on Friday with regard to Russia and the Russian hacks. it was very telling that people did not want Obama to respond as calmly and as measured as he was. But keep in mind, these are people who have an entire militaries at their disposal, militaries that could destroy the world 10, 20, 30 times over. I think we want as much measured response as we possibly can get for as long as we can get, because we have a man-child who is coming into the White House who is going to be anything but measured. And perhaps the office of the presidency will whip his ass into shape, like it seems to whip every president into shape. But this is the news out of Turkey today, and Putin's response has been extremely measured. So we'll keep an eye and see how this develops as we go along. You could join the conversation, 857-600-0518. Later on, I'll be speaking with a Florida activist, Wendy Sejour. She is part of the push in Florida to get in the battle between Dwight Bullard and Biddle. So she's going to come in and give us a little insight in terms of that particular. It's a localized race for DNC chair down there in Florida, but it is a very important race and a very telling race and with implications on the national scene. So we'll be talking with her momentarily. And in the meantime, I want you to join the conversation, 857-600-0518. In other news, more tragic news coming from the international scene. At least 9 people were killed in Germany, in Berlin, when a truck drove through a crowded Christmas market. 30 others were wounded. The attackers and the motivations are not clear at this moment of the recording. However, ISIS has claimed responsibility for it. Now, as we know with ISIS claims responsibility for everything, anything they possibly can, even though this is reminiscent of what happened in France earlier this year, the type of massacre with a truck plowing through a crowd. There's very close similarities. Obviously, it's almost apples to apples in this case. So it's very possible that this could be tied to ISIS, but there's no official word right now. The attack in France earlier this summer actually killed 86 people during a celebration of Bastille Day, and this also was claimed by ISIS. The White House has identified this as an apparent terrorist attack, and the German Interior Minister told Germany's ARD national broadcaster, quote, "I don't want to use the word attack yet, although a lot points to one." This is again. Well, we'll keep it. So Donald Trump weighed in, right? Of course, it's his time. It's his time to speak on these issues because he's the president-elect. He said that these are, quote, horrifying terrorist attacks in Berlin. And he said, quote, in a statement that Islamist terrorists and their networks must be eradicated from the face of the earth, a mission we would carry out with all freedom-loving partners. This attack actually came a few hours after another attack in Zurich, Switzerland. And in this other attack, a gunman opened fire in an Islamic center, wounding 3 people who were praying. And this is according to news outlets. So it's been a crazy day in the international community. Whether or not this is ISIS related, we will know in time. We'll probably know before you see this clip tomorrow. So if you're watching this clip on Tuesday, we probably have already confirmed who is behind this. But as of this recording, we don't have a solid confirmation from a source whether it's ISIS or not. All we do know is that 9 people have been killed just days before Christmas, and as they were shopping in a Christmas market. The driver has been identified as I believe a Pakistani immigrant who migrated to Germany this year. So of course this is going to be a lot of fodder for those people who are saying Trump wants to do extreme vetting. I mean, besides the fact that we already do extreme vetting in the United States, they're going to want to do somehow some magic. They're probably going to do the same exact vetting, but it will be okay now because it's vetting being done by the Trump administration. But stories like this obviously become political fodder, political footballs, and then we all too often just forget about the human tragedy because of how the narrative of what happened can either benefit or harm our particular political ideology. And that's exactly what happens with every single tragedy. Matter of fact, I don't even know if there's such thing as a tragedy anymore because we are so quick to politicize it for our own political purposes. All right. And I think I still have even more bad news to give you tonight. But such is life. In other news, actually a bit of good news. Let's go to a little, I think it's definitely good news. Coming out of North Carolina. So the incoming governor, Roy Cooper, who won by like 10,000 votes, right? The same governor that we spoke about last week, who is having his powers be basically robbed from him by the Republican Party, the outgoing Republican Party, and the outgoing governor. Well, he says that, I tell you what, we're going to one-up you. As soon as we get in, according to Roy Cooper, he said we're going to repeal the controversial HB2 law, also known as the bathroom bill. Now, the bathroom bill essentially said that a person has to use the restroom according to the gender that's identified, that they were identified as having in birth, specifically targeting transgender Americans, right? Extremely transphobic bill that was backed and supported by Republicans in North Carolina, along with about 13 Democrats. So that's the most interesting thing to me, is that the incoming Democratic administration is having to undo something that North Carolina Democrats helped do, right? So this law would never have been passed if not for Democrats. 13. 5 of those 13s came out as endorsees of and gave endorsements, rather, for Hillary Clinton. The other 6, I don't know if they ever endorsed anybody, but during the primaries, they endorsed Hillary Clinton. So it is a victory, right? It will be. I don't know if it's not an advance. We're not advancing the cause. It's not that type of victory. It's almost like it's a victory in the sense that we can hemorrhage some losses, right? So in its own way, it is a victory of its own kind. But the most ironic thing is that this would not be something that Roy Cooper would have to fix coming in if not for those 13 Democrats, 5 of whom supported and endorsed Hillary Clinton. Another segment of that bill, another aspect of that bill, was the attack on workers. So attack on labor. This was a bill that was attacking the trans community as well as workers. It was like a 2-for-1 for Republicans. In terms of what they were doing to workers, they were making it illegal for local cities and municipalities to raise the minimum wage. In other words, they ripped the power from the local municipalities and cities and it stated that the minimum wage could only be increased from the state level. Again, this legislation, which is perfect for Republicans, it makes sense. It's lockstep in what Republicans do. This is what they do, right? They use the fear of the LGBTQ community and they oppress the LGBTQ community. They do anything they can to harm the LGBTQ community. And if we can screw workers, LGBTQ workers as well as cisgendered workers, if we could just screw workers in general, it's a 2-for-1. This is what Republicans do. And apparently in North Carolina, this is what about 13 Democrats do. So it is always a twofold battle that we have to fight, right? We have to fight against the onslaught that is coming from Republicans. We'd be foolish to spend all of our time attacking Democrats. However, when Democrats behave like Republicans, we sure as hell got to get them too. You don't get a pass just because you got a matter of fact, it seems to be the case in 2016 going into 2017 that you're being held to an even higher standard now that we know that you have a D by your name. And that's the way it should be. Those 13 Democrats that voted for this legislation, I'm hoping that a lot of them did not return. But if they do return, then they need to be held accountable for their participation, for their role that they played in this discriminatory law and this anti-worker law. But as far as being the first bit of good news from tonight, I mean, it still stands as a bit of good news. So good luck from the incoming Democratic governor, Roy Cooper, and just get the rest of your Democrats in order. And so that way this type of thing doesn't have to happen again, because Republicans would not have been able to pass this law if not for those 13 Democrats. And on top of them being able to pass the law, they were able to claim that the law was bipartisan, which made the law seem as though it was not as egregious as it was, right? When someone can claim, oh, this had bipartisan support, that gives the appearance and the facade that it's not a damning piece of legislation, or that it is a moderate piece of legislation, or that it's not radical. But this is clearly a radically discriminatory an anti-worker piece of legislation. See, this is another problem with triangulating and with these conservative blue dog Democrats in the same ranks as progressives. It's because they get to sign off on Republican legislation, give Republicans the cover of bipartisanship, and then we as progressives have to sit back and not only attack the discriminatory piece of legislation, we also have to attack this idea that is somehow moderate because it was bipartisan. When in reality, I don't care if it was 50% Democrats and 50% Republicans, this piece of legislation should never have been signed into law, period. Bipartisan or not. And for every Democrat that signed on to it, they need to be held accountable electorally. All right, in other news. So let's talk about let's see. I'm actually losing track. I'm actually losing track of time here. I'm going to come back to this. I want to take a second here and welcome my guest to the program so we can have this conversation. Let me make a switch here. 1, 2, 3. And I want to welcome a longtime supporter of the Benjamin Dixon Show and all around progressive champion. You've seen her on Twitter. You see her doing her thing, but she's more, I think she's more well known in the Florida area, South Florida, for her activism there and the role that she plays in progressive politics down there. My stomping ground of South Florida, Wendy Sejour. And now, Wendy, as much as I know you, I'm horrible with last names. Is that the correct way to pronounce your last name?
You got it.
Oh, I said it right. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. How are you? Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on.
I say the honor is mine.
Show.
Thank you so much. I know you've been, I think you've been supporting the show almost just a little bit, just shy of how long I've been running the show. So you've known about Benjamin Dixon probably longer than anybody who's listening right now, with a few exceptions, right? So tell me about what you're working on with this race between Biddle and Bullard in the South Florida area. Tell us about the race. Bring us up to speed.
Oh, okay. Well, how far back do I need to go? Because this is a crap show of epic proportions.
Well, give us
like somebody
used
House of Cards as like viewed House of Cards as a documentary instead of a work of fiction. It's just incredible.
Well, I tell you what, I can guide a little bit. I mean, because I know you have a lot to say about it. Tell me a little bit about, tell us about Dwight, because I know Dwight Bullard. I know of his work, but tell us why you feel like, and so many people are fighting on his behalf for this position. And then we'll talk about Biddle.
Well, Dwight has been such a long-time champion of progressive causes, and he comes from a political family. His mother, Larcinia, was a state house rep and a state senator. His father was a state house rep, and his mother is legendary for fighting for causes and the African-American community in South Florida. He followed in her footsteps, and he has been one of the most effective progressive Democratic legislators in the state house and the state senate. He's, passed several pieces of legislation. He's advocated for everybody's rights, not just African Americans, but Hispanics and Native Americans, poor people, the middle class. And he's just been a great middle class champion who's walked the walk. He doesn't just sit in the state senate and talk. He's walked picket lines. He's gone on marches. He's put his own body on the front line, with people on the street working and doing the work. And he's just an incredible, selfless human being.
Now,
and
let me ask you a question right there, if you don't mind. Now, give us what's the official title of the position he's running for?
He's running to be state committee man, which is technically the liaison between the Miami-Dade local Democratic Party and the Florida Democratic Party at the state level. So he represents the local party at the state level on this, I think it's the Central Committee of the FDP, and he has voting power, quite a lot of voting power. State committeemen and committee women have the most power of anyone in state politics. They have huge block of votes. And, if you can get all the state committee men and committee women together on an issue, they run the party.
So
they dictate what happens and what doesn't happen.
So this is a local race that has statewide implications, a lot of significant power on the state level. I met a couple of the state committee women and men back in the day when I thought I wanted to be in the Florida Democratic Party and thought differently very quickly thereafter. But I digress. But the reason we're even discussing this on my show is because this battle between Bullard and Biddle has taken on a national kind of scope, particularly where it comes with Keith Ellison. Because there's some rumors and I say rumors because I haven't seen a concrete, and maybe you have something that I may not have come across, but I haven't seen a concrete statement yet from Ellison. But the implication that Biddle has stated that Ellison is going to endorse him. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, what's going on is that every piece of information that's come out in the press about this endorsement has come from Stephen Battel's campaign. I have yet to see anything concrete directly from Ellison's mouth or written on Ellison's letterhead. Everything has come from the Battel campaign. Even, I know that there were some quotes in the press the other day, but all of that is coming from the Battel campaign. To be honest with you, I really don't know if it's 100% true or not. I'm not surprised that it would happen. How can I put this without sounding? There's been this divide.
Don't worry about sounding any kind of way.
Between the black community and the right-wing Zionist, Israel can do no wrong faction of the Jewish community. And the Jewish community itself is split on this.
So
but,
this is, go ahead.
Keith Ellison has been taking it on the chin. And so Battel is his in. Battel would smooth the waters for him. Right. And then Ellison gives Battel some legitimacy, or he thinks it would give him legitimacy in the black community. He's mistaken, but he thinks that's what's going to happen.
He would be sadly
Sorely
sadly.
mistaken.
I know the black community well down there. And this is why it keeps popping up on my radar, because people I roll with when I was in Florida, friends of my family, for just longtime life friends, have been asking Ellison the question, right? On social media, like, Ellison, are you endorsing Battelle? Do you endorse Battelle?
And
Are you endorsing him over Bullard? And there's been like radio silence.
Radio silence, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's very confusing. It's very frustrating. And it's frustrating to me as a long-term progressive and a long-term Keith Ellison supporter. And he's not saying anything. He's not agreeing. He's not denying it. He's not saying it's true, but it's just letting it hang out there.
Right.
And frankly, I don't understand why he's letting it hang out there, because I don't see any advantage to him in getting cover from Battelle, because the damage that has already been done.
So here's my theory, though.
Battelle can do to take that back. So
right.
I don't get it.
So I think you've already said this, right? I think. Well, let's give a little more context here, right? So Dwight Bullard, if I'm not mistaken, Dwight Bullard has been the target of a lot of attacks claiming that he's anti-Semitic, attacks claiming that
he's a terrorist sympathizer.
Yeah. Tell us more. So he's been under attack, and then on the flip side, you have Battelle, who is the quintessential establishment candidate down there. Wealthy donor connected to Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Tell us more about Bullard's, the attack that's happening on Bullard, and then tell us more about the background of Battelle.
Okay. Well, the attacks on Dwight Bullard started in his primary race. One of his opponents, Andrew Corge, started attacking him for a trip that Dwight took to Israel with Dream Defenders. It was a fact-finding mission, and they went on a tour of the West Bank, talked to Palestinians to get their perspective. They spoke with Israeli Jews also. They just wanted to get a first-hand idea of what was going on the ground over there for themselves.
Right.
And apparently the tour guide, a tour guide that they had on the West Bank, maybe some 20-odd years ago, had been affiliated with some sort of alleged terrorist activity, but he was a tour guide. I mean, who does background checks on a tour guide, really? So when Dwight came back, that was used against him, in that since he was in the presence of this tour guide, that means he's a Hamas sympathizer.
Yeah.
And because he sides with Black Lives Matter and Dream Defenders in looking for Palestinian civil rights, that means he's anti-Semitic.
Right. So
it went all over the media. It was disgusting. It was really racist and disgusting.
Which is similar to the attacks on Keith Ellison, right?
On Keith Ellison.
Right.
Exactly. And so Dwight ended up losing his Senate seat because, of course, once that went out in the universe, the Republicans picked it up and just ran with it. And he got zero help from the party.
Wow.
None. He was completely abandoned by the party. There were very few of Florida Democrats who actually stepped up to defend him. And I should also be proud to say that the one person who did stand up and defend him in the Jewish community was Annette Taddeo. She stood up for him, spoke out for him in the Hispanic and the Jewish community. And so that was a good thing, but it wasn't enough.
Right.
It was not enough.
Right.
So he lost his seat, and he decided to, seek office in the local party again, not as chair this time, but as he was originally going to run as vice chair, and lost that seat. And then now he's running for committeeman, which just conveniently happened to open up within a week of the original elections, but that's a whole other story. And so I'm losing my train of thought here. I'm sorry.
No problem. I got you.
There's so much going on in my head, and I'm actually so angry about everything that's going on.
Well, actually, let me tie it in for you. let me move
Yeah.
the conversation a little bit here. So we have on the one side, you have Dwight Bullard, who has proven progressive credentials, a man of the people, and nobody's perfect, right? So we're not trying to make him out to be perfect, but in a competition between him and Patel, he and Patel, it's a clear choice. Whereas Patel has been is quintessential establishment.
He writes checks. Let's just be
That's his
straight
gift,
about it.
right?
They're trying to portray Patel as this great progressive who knows all about organizing and, getting people motivated and finding great candidates. It's just the same BS that they spewed about Hillary being this great progressive. And I'm sorry, the only thing that this man has ever done is write checks.
Wow.
I don't think, there's no evidence of him going out knocking on doors or, being out there up front in front of an issue. He writes a check. And when he writes that check, there's some payback.
And there's money
that's expected with that.
Right. I was going to say money
talks.
gets you far.
And
Money
he has influence.
money talks. Yeah. And he has Patel has his influence from the national level down to the local level. On the national level, he has go ahead.
He has raised millions of dollars. Don't get me wrong. He has raised money and given money to a lot of progressive causes. But writing a check doesn't make you an organizer. Writing a check doesn't mean you understand the ins and outs of running a political party and what it takes to build a candidate structure and an infrastructure to get out the vote. And the fact is, in Florida, for the last 4 years, the chair has been Allison Tant. She's been very successful at raising money. The Florida Democratic Party has had money.
Yeah.
And in the last 25 years, they've had the greatest losses of any other state party in the country.
Wow.
So clearly, money is not the problem.
See, you said something right there. You said something that is so pivotal, right? I think it's key here in this juncture. Right. We have depended on, I think Democrats relate to the party. Democrats relate to the party with being in bed with corporate America. Then we caught up and we fell in love with it and we just started taking money. And then we got late to the party when the Republicans start transition to more of a populist. And when I say populist, I mean their version of populism, Tea Party-esque, rejection of the establishment. And then Democrats stayed at this establishment mindset, and we stayed there too long. That's how we lost to Donald Trump, where Hillary Clinton is just like the Florida Democratic Party. She was able to raise millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to run for president, but money does not answer all of the problems in this equation. We have a problem with connecting with people. And here we are with Bullard, who can connect, and then you have the other person who, raises money. So I want to ask you again.
He can write checks.
Exactly, he can write checks. So back on the national implications, right? So we have this big hanging question that a lot of people have lasered in on this committee, state committeeman position, and they've zeroed in on it as, I don't want to call it a litmus test, but kind of as a chin check for Keith Ellison. Like, Keith, are you really down? Like, here is a black man who is the victim of the same type of attacks that you are. He's been called anti-Semitic. He's been called a Muslim or a terrorist sympathizer, Hamas sympathizer. Because all these things, and he is a progressive and he is an outsider. But Patel has claimed that you are endorsing him, and yet Ellison is silent. So this is like a lot of people who are not even remotely connected to Florida are looking at this race and wondering what Keith Ellison is going to do, because they feel like this is going to be the telltale sign of whether or not he's a real progressive. And as far as Florida's concerned, whether or not the Democratic Party is really ready to do something. You seem to feel like a lot of people will lose. A lot of people will leave if Patel gets this position, you feel.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, honestly, I will be gone. I cannot be a part of a party that allows this kind of manipulation and buying of power. We've been there. We've done that.
Right.
And it has not worked. 25 years of the same kind of bullshit. Pardon my language.
No, it's fine.
But we've been doing this for over 25 years.
Yeah.
And Florida is a state that has 500 and plus registered 500,000 plus registered Democrats. 300,000. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm giving the numbers for my county and not the state, but
Yeah.
Democrats outnumber Republicans in Florida by well over 500,000 registrations.
Wow.
And yet, every major office in the state is held by a Republican.
Wow.
The legislature is controlled by Republicans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Local government, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Money is not working.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. They refuse to see it.
They refuse to see it, and that's the aggravating part. They did not want to see this back in 2010 when the race was between I can't think of your boy name. He was went to FAMU, was a state trooper. His mother was in Congress. Kendrick Meek. Kendrick Meek. Yeah. When they ran Kendrick Meek,
they decided that Charlie Crist would be better.
At the last second, like in the middle of the race, they said Charlie Crist is going to be better. Bill Clinton came down for Charlie Crist. And I mean, this is the kind of madness.
At that time, Charlie Crist wasn't even a registered Democrat.
Not even. He was an independent. He had just left the Republican Party because he lost his primary to Marco Rubio. But this is the type of shenanigans that the Democratic Party in Florida has been doing. And this is how they lost their Senate seat to Marco Rubio. This is how they lost the governorship 2 times to Skeletor, to Charlie Crist. I mean, I'm not Charlie Crist, but what's his name?
Rick Scott.
Rick Scott. Right.
Rick Scott. I know. I try to obliterate his name from my memory too, but I can't.
The Florida Democratic Party needs help, and you're saying that it looks like they're going the wrong way.
In 2018, if Bill Nelson thinks that black voters and progressive voters and Hispanic voters are going to get out and turn out for him, he is sorely mistaken. Yes, the days of us being taken for granted are over.
Yeah.
These young millennials, they're not having it. They're issue driven. They're not party driven. And if the party chooses to ignore this large group of voters, they're dead. They're dead.
And, I'm agnostic when it comes to the Democratic Party. The election is over, so I don't even care anymore. I did not want Trump to win by any means. But now that the election is over, the Democrats have doubled down on stupid. So I'm rather agnostic. But thank you for coming on and shedding some light on what's going on. And so basically, we just need to hear from Ellison. Whether or not he is going to, if he's even weighing in on that race, right? It's a race that he doesn't even have to weigh in on, but Patel has.
He does not have to.
Exactly, but Patel.
And he's being played, I think. He's being played.
He's being played. He's being played. Wendy, thanks so much for coming on. I appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Do me a favor, because I have some people.
Podcast of yours.
I have some people in the chat room who want to support what you're working on down there. So give everyone your Twitter handle and how they can get up with you.
Oh, my Twitter handle is really simple. It's @WSejour. I got in on the Twitter early.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
@WSejour.
Awesome. Good luck with everything you're doing down there. Let's stay in touch.
Thank you. Bye.
Awesome. Bye-bye. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. Yeah, I mean, that's really what time it is. We are at the point where, I'm extremely agnostic when it comes to the Democratic Party. I'm about to become an atheistic evangelist against the Democratic Party, right? I'm trying to not go there yet. I'm trying not to just fully deconvert from all things Democrat and make the Democratic Party to be the second enemy. Enemy number one is conservatism. I don't care what nobody says. Enemy number one has always and will always be conservatism, particularly conservative social policy and conservative economic policy. But a close second may very well be the Democratic Party if they keep being stuck on stupid and keep doubling down with the same mistakes that got them there. And the problem is that who said this? Brandon from Politics and Grits yesterday. Go to Spreaker.com/The Benjamin Dixon Show and get your latest episode of Politics and Grits. But he said yesterday, Democrats' heyday, their high watermark was in the culture wars, particularly with identity politics. and they made such huge progress there. They had so many victories there, blah, 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 blah. So now everything is identity politics to them. It's like they bring a hammer to every fight. Everything they do, no matter if it requires a scalpel, they bring a hammer, right? And this is what they do. All they want to do is live in the time when it was intellectually easy for them to get clicks, make money, and feel good about themselves. And here we are after losing to Donald Trump, an election that was as much a referendum against Clintonism as it was a referendum against identity-only politics. And yet they can't seem to break away from identity-only politics. It's like they only have one song that they know how to dance to, and they want to force the entire world to conform to what they know when it doesn't work like that. And that's being gracious. That's being benevolent. In reality, we could just look at them as psychopaths, sociopaths who want to use identity politics as a means of controlling everyone, right? So you can look at it benevolently and they're still idiots, or you can look at them as being malicious and they're still idiots. Either way it goes, if they continue down this path, then we have to identify the Democratic Party as being public enemy number 2, second only to conservatism. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and our question?
Hey, Ben, this is Nick from Oregon.
Nick, what's happening, man? What's on your mind?
Hey, not too much. Hey, I tuned in really late to the show, but I was just wondering. I was listening to Politics and Grits last night, last night because I do it during work. By the way, awesome version. I think that was the best one you guys have done yet.
Awesome.
I was just asking, or I was just curious if you could give me a little context to a phrase that Brandon said, and just whether or not he was just kind of shooting off the hip, or if it's since you're at least very close to your PhD, if you could give me kind of a little context to the phrase. It's institutional or systemic inertia. And that's pretty much my only question. Just wanted to check with you on that. But great show. Good seeing you.
Thanks so much, man. Thanks for the call. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. I'm having to answer questions for Brandon. So did you just call it systemic inertia? Let's see. Overcoming systemic inertia. So it's actually a real term. I just did my Googles. I am super quick with my Googles and I can learn stuff really quickly. But let me see. Brandon is normally in the chat room. Let's see if Brandon has anything to say in the chat room. If he does, I'll let him answer for himself. Yeah, I don't have the answer for you. So it's rare, but I don't have the answer. All right. In other news, but as soon as I get the answer for you, Nick, I will get that answer posted for you. So in other news, speaking of public enemy number 1, and I don't know, it's a close first and second. I was going to say, or I have been saying this entire segment, that conservatism is public enemy number 1. And I have plenty of strong, logical, valid reasons that that's true. But did any of you see that shit from Keith Olbermann over the weekend? That we are at war with Russia. Or, whatever he said. We are at war with Russia, or better yet, we have lost the war to Russia. This dude, Keith Olbermann, went full-throated George Orwell. I mean, he went like complete 1984, we love Big Brother. And to me, the reason I bring that up in context of which one is worse, Donald Trump is horrible. Donald Trump is going to do a lot of stuff that screws America up for a very long time. But we'd be foolish not to pay attention to the insanity that is rich within the Democratic Party right now. I mean, the Malcolm Nances of MSNBC, the Joyanne Reeds of MSNBC, the Keith Olbermanns of GQ. I mean, they are really pounding the war drums of war against Russia over this hack. Which, whatever. Russia wanted Donald Trump. Fine. Investigate. Let's find out what happened. Let's get to the bottom of it. But when you see the behaviors and the willingness to do the exact thing that they spent 8 years condemning George Bush for doing, now they are doing. They spent 8 years condemning Fox News for doing. Now they are actively doing it as though they are in the right, as if though they are righteous and they are doing a great service to humanity. You see them coming out with the same level of propaganda that they just got through complaining about. And you have to wonder if they are mentally stable. And that's just me being, benevolent again, right? Because in actuality, it's coming off rather nefarious. It's coming off very insidious. Like their intentions and their motivations, they want to galvanize as many people as they can around them, get as many clicks as they possibly can, promote their career as fast and as far and as quickly as they can on the backs of pandering, red baiting, red scaring propaganda against Russia. So where I do see conservatism, Donald Trump, we've got a hell of a fight on our hands, and we need to be all hands on deck against them. We got to be simultaneously all hands on deck against the propaganda that's coming from liberal outlets. These MSNBC liberals who are just as sycophantic as Fox News viewers. I'm sorry, the stuff that I've seen come from them has proven to be equal. And it's embarrassing to think. It's embarrassing to think that at one time we thought that the left was generally, and I say general because the left is a broad term, but we were generally smarter than Republicans. And this election season has proven otherwise, that they are just as susceptible to propaganda and confirmation bias as anybody who watches Fox News, which in my opinion makes them so much worse, because you spend 8 years bitching about people falling for propaganda, and now you're falling for propaganda, or you're peddling propaganda. We are at war with Russia. No, we are at war with stupidity in the form of Keith Olbermann and MSNBC liberals. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question? Scotty, I can barely hear you. Sound like you're on the other side of the room.
Hold up. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you a little bit better. Go ahead. Let's see if we can try it. Go for it.
Okay, I'm see if I can get my phone better.
All right, we're gonna try. Let you try to call in again for me, Scotty, so we can get a better signal. We only have 5 minutes left. There's a couple other stories that I missed. And nothing else is super important, but I do want to just put this picture up on the screen. This is my new favorite picture of Donald Trump. Hang on, which way do I go? Yeah, this is Donald Trump. This is your new president, ladies and gentlemen. He just got elected into officially, he is the president-elect now. His electors were all but two from Texas, one who voted for Rand Paul, and I forgot who the other one voted for. All of his electors were faithful. 3 of Hillary Clinton's electors were unfaithful. One voted for Bernie Sanders. One voted for Colin Powell, and another one voted for the Faith Bald Eagle, I believe. I'm just going 100% off of memory here. So it looks like Hillary Clinton had less faithful electors than Donald Trump after all of this. The last 8 weeks of protests trying to convince electors to do otherwise. Donald Trump is your next president. January 20th, we will all be suffering listening to this man try to give an inauguration speech. All right, let's try the caller again. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question?
Yeah, Scotty.
Scotty, loud and clear, man. I can hear you now. What's on your mind?
Nothing much. I was watching that. Actually, I was listening to the Malcolm X DC Dave about the March on Washington. He called it the farce on Washington. Mm-hmm. And I was wondering what your opinions on that speech was, and whether or not, and this is I can say this is a fair question. Would you say that King would have been placed as the member of the Black Messiah leadership class at one point in time because of this speech, or
Man, wow, you took me off into left field, but it's a great question. You know I love to answer it. So let's just start there. Let's start with no, not King, and I'll tell you why. This is the reason. I mean, this is going to sound callous as fuck, right? That's the reason he's dead, right? The reason he's dead is because once we were quote unquote done with getting civil rights and the Voting Rights Act, he immediately transitioned to a bigger problem, which was the problem of class, the class and race, right? So he would not have fallen into the misleadership class. One, even at the time, right? Even if we look at it at the time, there was work to be done on Voting Rights, Civil Rights Act, exactly what he was fighting for. And the people who didn't like him at the time didn't like him because of what he was fighting for, and the manner in which he was fighting for it. But I think hindsight is 2020. I mean, without him, without King, most of what we got in the 60s, the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, would not have happened. Now, had he stayed there and doing like most of these black leaders are doing now, just relitigating the same thing over and over again, instead of moving forward to a new issue and to the rest of the issue, not even a new issue, but the continuation of the same issue, then yeah, I would agree that he could have been easily lumped into the misleadership class. But the reason he's not here right now is because he very quickly and very astutely saw that the problem was not just race, but it was a problem of economics in America. And once he found that intersection and start uniting poor people of color across the world, across the nation, and white people as well, that's when they killed him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was wondering that because I was listening to the speech and I was just sitting there thinking, because I know that Malcolm had his, disagreements with Martin, and when he's talking about the meeting that they had with JFK and some of the concessions that they had to make because of the march, the FBI controlling their I think it was the microphone. If they said anything out of order, then they would play Mahalia Jackson. Yeah, I always thought about that. So, but that's pretty much all.
I mean, you know what's amazing though. So right, you had Malcolm and Martin on somewhat opposite sides of the equation, and but before Malcolm died, Malcolm came a little bit closer to where Martin was, and before Martin died, Martin came a little bit closer to where Malcolm was. I don't know if I said that right because the M-A-R, they mixed it up. So Malcolm came closer to Martin. Martin came closer to Malcolm. Both of them actually grew. And this may sound condescending. Well, these great behemoths of men and leaders, but they actually grew even further from the high point that white America gives him credit for, right? The high point for Dr. King was, I have a dream. Well, he grew so much further tthan that. And as he grew, he got a little more militant and got a little closer to Malcolm. And as Malcolm came back from Mecca and saw all of the different faces and colors of people who were Muslim like he was, and he moved away from the Nation of Islam, he got a little bit closer to Martin. And somewhere in that nexus is the biggest threat to America, because both of them were killed shortly after. Thanks so much for the call. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Always a pleasure hanging out with you. I think I will. No, I don't think. I know. I will see you tomorrow.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.